$740 million. That was the offer on the table inside a boardroom in Palo Alto, California. In 2015, the Citizen Watch Company looked Eric Migicovsky in the eye and offered to buy his startup Pebble for nearly $750 million. It was the ultimate Silicon Valley dream come true. It was the finish line. But Eric didn't sign the paper. He said no. He thought he was worth more. He thought he was building an empire right there in California that would rival Apple. Exactly 18 months later, that same company was sold for scraps, just $23 million. In less than 2 years, over $700 million in value was simply vaporized. Gone. Poof. This isn't just a story about a failed gadget. This is the single most expensive mistake in the history of American startups. This is the autopsy of how a company born in the heart of the tech world was crushed by its own ego. To understand how you turn down a $740 million check, you have to understand the sheer mania that surrounded this company. Before the Apple Watch was even a rumor, there was Pebble. The year was 2012. The iPhone had become standard, and innovation in the United States felt stagnant. Then came a crazy idea, a computer on your wrist that actually worked. Although Eric Migicovsky started tinkering in Canada, the real story began when he brought his dream to Mountain View, California, to join Y Combinator. He was trying to crack the code in the toughest market on Earth. But initially, the Silicon Valley venture capitalists slammed the door in his face. Investors on Sand Hill Road told him, "Hardware is hard," and "nobody wants to wear a screen." They were wrong, and Pebble was about to prove it to the entire country. Broke and desperate, Pebble launched a campaign on Kickstarter with a modest goal, $100,000. They just wanted enough cash to manufacture a small batch. But when they hit the publish button, the internet exploded. They didn't just hit their goal, they obliterated it. In just 2 hours, they had the money. By the time the campaign closed, Pebble had raised $10.2 million from nearly 70,000 backers, mostly from the US. It was a world record. It was a phenomenon. Suddenly, Pebble wasn't just a startup. It was the darling of San Francisco. They had done the impossible. They had built a piece of hardware right here in the West that people genuinely loved. The original Pebble watch wasn't fancy. It looked like a toy. But it had a battery that lasted a week, and it was charming. While Apple and Samsung were still in the lab, Pebble owned the wrists of every nerd, engineer, and early adopter from New York to Los Angeles. By 2013 and 2014, Pebble was flying high. Best Buy put them on shelves across America, right next to Fitbits. The press called Eric the next big thing in tech. And this is where the poison of success starts to seep in. When the entire Bay Area tells you that you're a visionary, you start to lose touch with reality. Then came the rumors. The sleeping giant in Cupertino, Apple, was waking up. This brings us back to that fateful moment in 2015 in Palo Alto. Citizens saw the writing on the wall. They offered the lifeline, $740 million. Let's pause for a second and imagine the alternate timeline. Let's imagine Eric picked up that pen and signed the deal. If he had said yes, Pebble would likely still exist today as a premium arm of Citizen. The brand would be alive. But more importantly, the lives of everyone in that room would have changed forever. The early engineers, the ones who slept under their desks to write the code, would have become multi-millionaires instantly. They would be buying houses in San Francisco cash down today. Eric himself would have walked away with hundreds of millions, cemented as a genius who knew exactly when to exit. It was the perfect Hollywood ending. Generational wealth secured, legacy protected. But that didn't happen. He didn't sign. He convinced himself that saying no was an act of bravery. In reality, it was an act of financial suicide. The fall was fast and brutal. The Apple Watch launched, and while critics complained about its battery life, the American consumers didn't care. It was an Apple product. Almost overnight, the cool factor of Pebble evaporated. Sales flatlined. Inventory started piling up in warehouses across California. The cash burn rate at Pebble HQ was astronomical because they were paying Silicon Valley salaries and rents, acting like a unicorn when they were actually a sinking ship. In a panic, Pebble went back to Kickstarter. They raised $20 million. On the surface, a win, but on Wall Street, it smelled like desperation. Why was a 4-year-old company begging for pre-orders? The sharks smelled blood. Then came the second offer. The universe gave Eric one last chance. Intel, another American tech giant, reportedly expressed interest for around $70 million. Now do the math. $740 million to $70 million. That is a 90% drop. It's a gut punch. But $70 million is still enough to pay back investors and walk away with dignity. But once again, the deal fell through. They were chasing the ghost of that $740 million. They were doubling down on a losing hand. By late 2016, the game was over. Pebble was insolvent. They couldn't pay their rent in Palo Alto. In December 2016, the Grim Reaper arrived in the form of Fitbit. But Fitbit didn't want the company. They just wanted the software engineers. They paid $23 million. That's it. The amount was so low that it barely covered Pebble's outstanding debts. The venture capitalists got pennies on the dollar. The employees, who in that alternate timeline were buying mansions, got absolutely nothing. Their stock options were worthless paper. The aftermath was silent and sad. The Pebble servers were shut down. Today, when you look at an Apple Watch on someone's wrist in New York, you are looking at the device that killed Pebble. But the truth is, Apple didn't kill Pebble. Pebble killed Pebble. They died the moment they thought they were too good for $740 million. Eric Migicovsky had the winning lottery ticket in his hand, and he threw it in the trash, convinced he could win the lottery twice. He was wrong. And that mistake cost him an American empire.